Simone Inzaghi has left Inter. We know. I know. Unless you were living under a rock. I know I did a reaction to this the other day whilst I was on holiday, but I feel like we need something more in depth, right, guys? We need to close this loop. We need to get into the reasons why he left, the reasons why he should have stayed, maybe. Could Inter have done something to keep him? What's his legacy ultimately at Inter? A full Inzaghi to Al-Hilal evaluation. But before we get into it, guys, you know what to do. Leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And I don't know if you guys saw the video today, guys. Al-Hilal actually posted the video of Inzaghi at their training center. Of us feeling betrayed, feeling anger, feeling rage, but also feeling some form of respect for the guy getting his bag. But if you felt any of those emotions I just mentioned there, leave a thumbs up. But anyway, let's get into it. I prepared a few kind of graphics to go through those talking points with you guys. And of course, you guys let me know anything that I've missed, anything that you would add on top. And of course, try to remain civil, guys. I know this topic has generated some strong opinions, but always we're talking about football, guys. So calma, calma, okay? Let's get into it. Inzaghi's decision evaluated. Why he left on the left-hand side, why he should have stayed on the other side. So kind of, as you guys know, I always try to make balanced argument, arguing for both sides of things, seeing how we end up at the end. Yeah, now we know why he left. Let's be real. And that's probably the reason why most of us will leave. And those are the 50 million reasons. And I think it's even more. I think it's 26 million per year, which is probably about more than 52 million in total, tax-free, which are plenty of reasons to leave Inter. But at the same time, yes, it's generational money for you and your family, multi-generational. Like, you won't even have to work. Your grandkids won't have to work. Their kids probably don't have to work after this setup. But at the end of the day, Inter were offering you more money as well, Inzaghi. You were going from 6.5. The reports were Inter were going to up it to 7.5, maybe even 8 million, making him, he was already matching Conte's highest salary in Serie A. This would have taken him above Conte. So they would have made him the most paid. So money-wise, yes, it's, you can't compete at all. That's tripling, quadrupling your salary, even the new salary that could have been at Inter. But at his age, he's still relatively young as a manager. That's very early to go. That's very early to go. And it kind of does set some red alert or some alarms, even for teams in the future, and in terms of his ambitiousness, his hunger in the game, and what's his real end objective in the game. So yeah, but that is the reason. And Morata confirmed, even he himself confirmed that there's a contract on the table, or they were going to talk about it end of the season, and that obviously didn't happen, but it was there. And I think that was a very good offer in the end from Inter as well. Now, the next reason that he left for Al-Hilal, I think over the last 4 years, one thing Inter fans we have appreciated him for has been, in press conferences in general, he is a gentleman. He's quite, soft-spoken most of the time, especially with the media. He never really says anything that's, catches the headlines or gets, social media channels and accounts going mad. But at times it also felt like, because of that, his personality and demeanor, decisions went against Inter, the whole Marotta League thing, and when Inter won Scudetto, Inzaghi never talked about it. But when he did, and especially this season, he kind of tried to a few times. He tried to speak up about it. He didn't get no support from Marotta and the director Piero Ausilio, anyone really trying to go with him and say like this decision. Let's take an example: Bisek versus Roma. The penalty that should have been there afterwards was basically admitted by the refereeing association that it was a mistake. They didn't release the tapes, the VAR audio. Literally, Gianluca Rocchi said he didn't want to release it to not cause controversy. Yeah, I mean, he did release it and it did cause controversy because it was the wrong decision, as was admitted. But when Inzaghi was trying to put forward his arguments for this, he didn't receive that backing from Beppe Marotta, who prefers to kind of toe the line and try to keep, all his various, other interests afloat, and his, political interests, and his, diplomatic interests. And it ends up not kind of alienating the coach. And we saw that happening with Conte as well. And I think that got to Inzaghi ultimately. And then the other reason, of course, he didn't feel like he wanted the assurances on the Mercato. This squad was aging, probably needed a bit of refreshing after many Mercatos where Inter underinvested, or, we know our net transfer spend is actually negative under Inzaghi. Teams like Pisa and some MLS teams and relegation teams, and Premier League, of course, and it's out there. The numbers are out there. Inter are like ranked, they're like 200, I believe, 200 in the last like 4 or 5 seasons for net transfer spend. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think this year, with the record-breaking revenue, which is actually a reason he should have stayed, where I think, Oak Tree, Marotta, maybe because of this record-breaking revenue from the Champions League and Club World Cup, well, this was actually going to be the year that they could have invested and given him some more assurances in the Mercato. But actually, I still think, because of it is Oak Tree still holding on to the purse strings, and they don't want to really invest. They just want this extra revenue. They are going to invest some of it, but majority of it, they're not going to actually spend any more than they need to on this transfer market. So that assurance, I don't think he got that for sure. They said, that there was that meeting on Tuesday where it was supposed to be them discussing whether he stays or goes, but apparently that meeting only lasted half an hour. So a lot of these decisions, I think in the end he already made his mind up, let's be honest, whether it was these reasons or not. When you're moving to a country like Saudi Arabia, for a guy who's never been outside of Italy, in terms of not on holiday, in terms of just moving out, he spent all of his career and life in Italy. He didn't make the decision to move to Saudi Arabia overnight. More and more reports are coming out now that his family already had flew out to Saudi Arabia to check out schools and, where to live and all this kind of stuff. His son was part of the negotiation with Federico Pastorello, the agent that always, if there's issues at Inter in terms of people leaving, usually Pastorello is involved. Lukaku, he was the Lukaku agent when that was all going on, and now he was involved in this move with his agency to get Inzaghi this move to Al-Hilal. So as much as these reasons I'm discussing here are probably true and are in relation to Inzaghi moving away, and Beppe Marotta saying that Inzaghi only decided on Tuesday after the Champions League final that he was leaving, I think he's either lying, or he was completely naive, or he thought that he could change Inzaghi's mind on these things. But ultimately, it looked like Inzaghi already had made his mind up before the Champions League final where he was doing it. And that was my prediction, actually, was that if Inter had won that Champions League, which obviously was nowhere near happening in retrospect, because we got absolutely disgraced and embarrassed, my prediction was that he was going to leave after the Champions League final because there was nothing else that he could win with Inter, so that cycle would be over. But it looks like, I think it was either, regardless of whether Inter won or lost, he was leaving Inter, which is kind of, disappointing in a way, because we'll get into it afterwards about his legacy at Inter. And of course, the other one, why he's moved there, and I think you will see it on his face in the next year or two whilst he's there. Italy, being the manager of Inter in Italy, the media pressure, the pressure cooker that is Italy, and obviously the pressure coming from the club and above to win titles at a club like Inter, it's clear. It's a big, heavy, it's a big weight on your shoulders. You see it, Inzaghi. Type in a picture of Inzaghi at Lazio when he was managing Lazio, and type in a picture just 4 years later now at Inter. The difference between Inzaghi then and now is big. The skin, the everything. He looks a lot more. He definitely aged a lot quicker at Inter. In the 4 years at Inter, he's probably aged about 10 years, doubled. his age. And that's the toll a team like Inter takes. And that's definitely, after 4 years of doing that, is definitely taking the toll on them. But I think the club is getting in the next year, they probably could have done something in terms of telling him, look, we made a mistake. The squad wasn't deep enough for all these 3 or 4 competitions. We kept reiterating to everyone that we wanted to be in everything. That's probably, through Inzaghi's mentality as well. But the club could have said, look, next season, we only go Scudetto, Coppa Italia. We don't care about Champions League next year, or just Champions League and Scudetto. And we just, you can play the Primavera in Coppa Italia, and you can forget about the Supercoppa. Just focus on 2 competitions max. That could have been something to try to convince him. But again, as I said, I think none of these things in the end would have ended up convincing him. Another thing that I didn't include there that a lot of Interisti mentioned is that Inter shouldn't have left him. Marotta shouldn't have left him on 1 year left of his contract. This yearly renewal that we've been doing with him was, maybe not the best way to show your faith in him and confidence in him. I agree to a certain extent, but again, let's say Marotta gave him a 10-year contract. Everyone said, let's make him our Sir Alex Ferguson, 10-year contract. But it ultimately, that still wouldn't compete on the money that Al-Hilal would offer. And then in terms of, if Inzaghi is drained and tired of, not being protected, all of these things, that doesn't change on the contract, having a length of contract. So I kind of disagree there. And again, in terms of his actual performance, Inzaghi, we'll get into it. I agree. I was one of the guys that also saw Inzaghi wanting to stay in there, build for something really long-term. That's very rare these days. But when we reflect upon his performance over these 4 years, the underachievement in some aspects did not deserve these long-ass contracts that some Interisti said he should have got. And now let's move on to why it's good that he left. I mean, guys, 5-0 embarrassment like that in front of the world of football. Can you really? Is he a guy that really can re-motivate, re-energize the squad after a 5-0 embarrassment like that? I mean, we know him, like, what the type of guy he is. His body language, the type of guy he is. He's not really, I don't know, a guy that you would, say he's the best at rallying the troops and giving a super motivating speech. You can see here his body language. He's well spoken. He definitely knows how to understand his players, speak to the players. He's quite a young coach, so he understands them. The players always say he's like a friend to them. But then again, that part is maybe one of the distractions about Inzaghi, is that he's almost too friendly with the players. He's almost a bit too soft touch with his players. And I don't think without a complete squad overhaul, he would have what it takes to really get these guys going again to compete for the titles as we would want. So I think in that sense, if it was anything other than this complete embarrassment, if it was a 1-0, just like the Man City loss, that was a completely understandable, completely performance to be proud of. This is not to be proud of. And then Interisti as well, us as fans, we would be holding this over Inzaghi's head. First game of next season into Torino. It's, in Torino winning 1-0 at the 70th minute. The crowd is already getting on the back of the team after the disappointment. We haven't forgiven them for that. We haven't forgiven Inzaghi. The pressure would be mounting. I think after a result like that, and this next point, after 4 years, it's a long time. That is a cycle in modern football. We're just not going to see. We're not going to see Sir Alex Ferguson. We're not going to see Arsene Wenger. I mean, in Italy, you don't even see that. In Italy, in general, those are examples from the Premier League. In Italy, you never see that. Gasperini is the example of this. What is it now? 8-9 years at Atalanta. Now he's finally left as well. It just can't happen, and it won't happen because there's so much is different in Italy. The pressure cooker, the fans, the media, the coaches, and the players themselves. Like, it definitely goes a lot more in cycles in Italy than anywhere else. So 4 years is probably, 4 years is probably the equivalent of like 10 years in, football from the 90s and the 2000s. Nowadays, it goes a lot quicker for both players and managers. That's why there's no Bandiere as footballers, but it applies the same for managers, because this was Inzaghi's decision. Inter wanted to keep him. And another good reason that he left is that, was he really the guy that fought to bring forth this new oak tree project? They've said it many times. Marotta's talked about it many times. Even Inzaghi's talked about it, that oak tree want to bring in a new strategy, younger players, which means probably cheaper players, lower salaries, less experienced. Inzaghi himself is a coach that, via his interviews and things, he's kind of confirmed it. Like, if you read between the lines, when they ask him about Arnautovic, much maligned signing that we attribute to Marotta Ozilio, as it should be. It is their decision at the end of the day. But Inzaghi himself said he really wanted Arnautovic at Inter. So his was one of his requests. Guys like Mkhitaryan, who are unmovable in the team, in the starting 11, regardless of their performance. As Inzaghi, he requested Acerbi, who was obviously fantastic, but he requested him over other younger profiles that we were targeting, because that's the profile he wants. The yearly renewals of Darmian's, De Vrij, I'm sure he had a heavy involvement in all those things. The lack of playing time whenever we do sign new players, and their embedding and the adaptation, or lack of play time, really. I don't think he wanted to be part of the signing more Sucic now, more Buchanan's, more Luis Enrique. He probably wanted more the continuation of the Marotta way of doing things, of expensive free transfers like the Taremis, Mkhitaryan, Zielinski's, Dzeko's. Those are the types of players that he wanted, and I don't think that would have fit. Whether you agree with the oak tree strategy, which I am already very doubtful of, he wasn't probably the suitable guy for this project. And we've seen it. It's not just at Inter, with Lazio too. He's not really shown that he's a guy that really brings through young players, especially if you're talking about the academy, which, according to the reports, Inter want to start doing now more and more. And ultimately, 4 years, when we look back, he did underachieve in Serie A. And that's, cold-hearted outlook towards his 4 years. Did amazing in Europe, but ultimately he did underachieve in Serie A. And whilst the other teams weren't as good as they were, that's not good enough. And I think, in the end, he needed to pay for that a little bit as well. But again, this was his decision, not Inter's. Inter wanted to keep him. And then ultimately, now let's finish up. What is his legacy? It's not all negative now, of course, and I'm not going to be a salty Interista just because he's left us and in the cold like this. There is definitely a lot of positive in his legacy. Aesthetically, the best football that Inter has played, and I'm not saying that myself. You ask Interisti from the 80s, from the 90s, from the 2000s, older Interisti, they will tell you this is the best football that Inter have played. Of course, it's subjective. Some may say other things as well. Some say Trapattoni's team. Some may say Mourinho's team, and Mourinho's team in some of those counterattacks and some of the way that we played was really good as well. But overall, over multiple weeks and match days and whole seasons and Champions League, the way the Inzaghi team played, I mean, there's so many tactical videos out there of the way Inzaghi's movement and freedom, rotation, and all this kind of stuff, and passing, the patterns, the 3-5-2, everything, the amount of goals we scored, the way he got the best out of Lautaro, Thuram, and the wing backs and the midfielders. It's beautiful to watch. It's subjective, but I think majority of Interisti will agree that this is the best football Inter has played. And then he brought back, of course, the respect on Inter's name in Europe. Let's not forget, guys, we got back after a Banta era. We got back into Europe with Spalletti, but couldn't qualify past the group stage. Conte came in, was doing great in Serie A, second and first, but then couldn't qualify past the group stage. Absolute laughing stock. And we lost the Europa League final as well. And Inzaghi comes in every single year. We qualify past the group stage and doing it well. We play against big teams and we show up quite well. We just narrowly lost to Liverpool, and Inzaghi just couldn't let that one go. He always went on about that one, which kind of showed that he was always kind of thinking more about Europe than Serie A, really. when they ask him which game would you rather replay, the Milan derby that changed everything, that Scudetto season for Milan, or the Liverpool game, and he was always saying the Liverpool game. But yeah, that the style of play, and then the results in Europe, and of course the two finals, outstanding. He brought back respect on Inter's name, but then last Saturday he did destroy that once again. And when are we going to get rid of this stigma and this stain on our beautiful badge, guys? It's going to take a long ass time to get rid of that, and you're never going to delete that off the record books now. But going back on to another positive legacy moment, the historic Seconda Stella in Milan's face. Beautiful walk to this Seconda Stella, second star, won it in Milan's face that season. Yeah, it was an enjoyable season. The football we played, the domination in Serie A, some of the goals, the late goals, and the drama, and the way we won that. It will go down. It will be remembered with it for Interisti in a long time. And we deserve that. But then again, I will remember him, unfortunately, as the guy that kind of gifted two Scudetti to two inferior teams on paper, like Pioli's Milan and Conte's Napoli. There is no Pioli's Milan, and they showed it afterwards, that Milan, the lack of continuity from that Milan team, that was an overachievement, and that Inter should have won the Scudetto that year. And it still is. It still is. I'm still angry for that Scudetto loss to Milan, but we kind of made up for it with that Seconda Stella in their face. So that's fair enough. But then this season, once again, I know we played 19 more games than Conte's Napoli. I know all that. But that Napoli team last season finished 10th. Some of those players in that Napoli team, like Lukaku, most Interisti wouldn't even touch. We didn't want Lukaku back. We don't want guys like Meret. We don't want guys like Pasquale Mazzocchi. We don't want guys like Politano, Inter reject. But Antonio Conte won the Scudetto, and it does not reflect well at all on Simone Inzaghi, who ultimately, as we said, has underachieved in Serie A. But within the context of everything, he did outstanding work. When he first came in, after Conte left us high and dry, after Lukaku Hakimi was sold, it looked like Inter might even go into financial ruin. But the fact that he worked within these financial restraints, he improved players, came in, improved players like Hakan Çalhanoğlu, Di Marco. Players had their best seasons under him. We're talking about Çalhanoğlu having best ever seasons. Becoming the best versions of themselves under Inzaghi. Free transfers like Mkhitaryan, Acerbi becoming the best version of himself. Perisic had his best season under Inzaghi. Lautaro has had his best season under Inzaghi. Thuram has now become the player that he is under Inzaghi. Bastoni's gone up a notch under Inzaghi. Onana was amazing under it. Like all these transfers that are not even, most of them free transfers, low value, not wanted by other clubs. Inzaghi did that, and I will always be grateful how he guided us, the way he guided us in these financial difficulties, throughout these difficulties, turbulent times. Inzaghi guided us through that, and very well. And I will always be grateful in the manner that he did it as well, with his style, his demeanor, very gentlemanly like, very much to be admired. But now, ultimately, his legacy in the way he leaves straight after a Champions League final lost 5-0, with doubts on whether, was he already thinking about the Al-Hilal move? Was he distracted by this already? There was the players distracted by this, which I don't buy into, by the way, guys. If that was true, that the players knew about this, in terms of, they probably did as well, and that he was talking about them, trying to convince some of them to come with him and stuff like that. But that reflects even worse on the players, guys, not on Inzaghi. The fact that these players couldn't even concentrate on the biggest redemption story ever for Inter, after losing the Champions League final 2 years back. They all wanted this. They were all focused on this. I don't buy into any of that. But for Inzaghi, it definitely does not look good. Leaving just a few days afterwards, after a 5-0 loss like that, flying off to Saudi Arabia, tripling, quadrupling his salary, and not really, no apology given to fans, because that's none of those players deserve to wear the Inter shirt that night. And I haven't seen many, apart from Denzel Dumfries and a half apology from Lautaro. I haven't seen enough apologies to Interisti, and the coach is the face of that, and it feels like he kind of left like a coward, and that is ultimately, unfortunately, now the legacy that Simone Inzaghi leaves with. But that's my opinion. That was my reflection, my final verdict on Simone Inzaghi's time at Inter and his decision to leave Inter. You comment down below if there's anything I didn't mention that should have mentioned, that needs to be mentioned. Let me know in the comments down below. Now it is a new era. I will be making new videos on Christian Kivu's Inter, what's to come this summer. So keep a lookout on the channel for that, guys. Thank you for the support. Regardless who is the coach at Inter, Inzaghi, Mourinho, Kivu, Fabregas, I don't care who it is. Always, always, always Forza Inter.